Eric Gray.
Number 3, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I should like to answer questions 3 and 17 together. Since SDSR 15, we have cut steel on the first Type 26 and signed the contract to buy new Apache helicopters. We are on track to deliver by the end of 2020 initial operating capability for Carrier Strike, maritime patrol aircraft and to field Ajax. We have launched our innovation initiative and published both our shipbuilding and our international defence engagement strategies.
Cray.
Minister, for that reply. HMS Bulwark helped evacuate 1,300 British citizens from Lebanon during the 2006 crisis. Given the recent problems the Foreign Office had evacuating citizens caught up in Hurricane Irma, will he argue for his department or DFID to lead on future evacuations? And does he today guarantee to maintain the literal capacity of the fleet provided by HMS Bulwark and Albion?
Minister.
Well, I think one of the strengths of this government is how we successfully work together between departments. I think we saw the comprehensive approach working very effectively during recent weeks with the response from across government to Hurricane Irma in the Caribbean. And that's exactly the approach that we should be taking.
Alex Norris.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. SDSR 2015 aimed for at least 10% of Armed Forces personnel to be from a BAME background. Latest figures show that just 2.4% of regular officers are from a BAME background, and there are currently no BAME officers at a 2-star rank or above. When will ministers publish a new diversity strategy to get to grips with this challenge?
Minister.
The Honourable Gentleman is quite right that Britain is changing, and it's very important that our armed forces represent modern Britain. Actually, there's a very impressive strategy in place at the moment where he's quite right that the target is for 10% of the BAME community now to be recruits and equally 15% women. We've had varying success across the three forces. The Royal Air Force are doing the best by far, but year on year we are seeing improvements, and I'm determined that we should continue to recruit role models to help this process.
Mr. Philip Holloway.
By 2020, the commitments set out in SDSR 2015 will be funded by a defence budget totalling a record £40 billion. The government's welcome commitment to spending 2% of our economy on defence is the minimum NATO requirement. The government's welcome commitment to this, is it rubbing off on our fellow NATO counterparts?
Minister.
Well, my honourable friend makes a very powerful point. Indeed, we are committed to spending at least 2%, and I'm delighted that we continue to do that. Slowly but surely, we are getting this message across to our NATO allies. And whilst only a minority of them do spend 2%, we're conscious that the direction of travel is positive.
Scott Mann. Paul J. Sweeney.
Number 6, Mr. Speaker.
Minister of State.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I should like to answer questions 6 and 11 together. We are committed to maintaining the overall size of the armed forces, including an army that is able to field a war-fighting division. Whilst army recruitment and retention remains challenging, over 8,000 people joined the regular army last year, and since April, applications are over 20% higher compared to the same period last year.
Paul J. Sweeney.
I thank the Minister for that answer, but I'd like to ask him to recall that the year I was born in 1989, the regular army strength was 140,000, and in 2006 when I joined the Territorials, the regular army strength was 102,000, yet in recent years we've seen the army fall below a regular strength of 82,000, the government stated target to only 80,000, including a 40% fall in armoured strength of the army. Would the Minister not accept that this is an unacceptable degradation of British army strength?
Yes. Minister.
No, I don't. It's important to note that the Army is currently 95% manned. I do accept that there are challenges. Having probably the highest employment rate we've had in recent years doesn't help when it comes to recruiting the Army. Also, as we discussed earlier, the changing nature of Britain and having to fight harder to make sure that all parts of society will join the Army. But it's also about the offer. And I must say that when the Leader of the Opposition says he cannot see a situation when he would deploy the Army overseas, that's hardly a good recruiting tool for young people who want to join the Army to do exactly that.
Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The latest figures show that the Army is running at 6% under the number of personnel needed, with a gap growing. How understaffed do we need to be before the Secretary of State will put some pressure on the Chancellor to lift the 1% pay cap in order to boost recruitment?
quote labour for high unemployment?
Well, the Army, as I say, is 95% recruited and quite capable of fulfilling all of its commitments. I am pleased that there will be some flexibility in how we apply that pay. Of course, we have the Armed Forces Pay Review Body which set that, but it's important to have some flexibility so that we can attract people into the skill sets that we are currently short of.
Andrew Bridgen. Can my right honourable friend confirm or deny if there's any truth in the current media speculation that the UK Armed Forces are about to be subsumed into a European Defence Force to placate the European Union?
Absolute stuff and nonsense.
Well, there really is speculation. No, I think I can absolutely scupper that one, thank you.
Absolute nonsense.
Mr. Marcus Fish.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does my right honourable friend agree that Yeovil's multi-role Wildcat helicopters ably support and protect our army units and could be upgraded with missiles even better to support more focused strike brigades?
Minister.
Well, of course, these are just some of the questions which we're currently considering under the National Security Capability Review, which is ongoing. The purpose of that review really is to decide how best that we can use the money that we are investing in our armed forces to maximise that capability.
John Cryer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So on the basis of the Minister's first answer, can you guarantee that the Army strength will not drop below 80,000?
Minister.
Well, we continue to work very hard to ensure that we do have new recruits coming. As I say, the news this year is positive. We have over 8,000, which is up some 20% on last year.
Helen Goodman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Number 13, please.
Minister of State.
The tremendous work of RFA Mounts Bay last month in the Caribbean in response to Hurricane Irma demonstrated the versatility of amphibious ships in the Royal Navy.
Goodman.
It did indeed, but people in County Durham will be very alarmed that there appears to be a question mark over the future of HMS Bulwark. She's one of the newest amphibious ships. She's been the fleet flagship. She's been used to rescue migrants in the Mediterranean. Surely a decision to decommission her early would be a false economy.
Minister.
Well, I too have read the speculation in the press, and it is just that. As we've already discussed at Defence Questions today, there is a National Security and Capability Review. It's very important we have that view. It's about trying to bring together capabilities with our investment. But equally, the Honourable Lady would recognise that whilst that capability review is ongoing, it would be entirely inappropriate for me to pluck out individual capabilities and comment on them.
See, the Minister of State is enjoying the benefits of family encouragement. And this is something that we enthusiastically welcome. Sir Roger Gale.
Mr. Speaker, in welcoming my honourable friend's assurance that the future of our amphibious capability is under active and positive consideration, could I say, as one who's been privileged to spend just a little bit of time on HMS Bulwark, that she is a magnificent fighting ship. She punches way above her weight. She's served this nation very well, and to remove her from service would be an absolute tragedy.
Minister of State.
Well, I recognise my honourable friend's support, and indeed the support of colleagues from across this House who feel strongly on this matter. We do enjoy amphibious capability. Of course, it's not just Albion and Bulwark. Albion is about to step up into the high readiness role for the next 5 years, and Bulwark will be going into the low readiness role, but also the 3 Bay class, and we'll also be investing into amphibious capability for the QE class as well.
Luke Pollard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the Member of Parliament that represents the Dockyard Naval Base where Albion and Bulwark are base ported, can I ask the Minister to speed up this review, because there are lots of people that are very concerned about their jobs and the local economy if Albion, Bulwark and the Royal Marines are to be scrapped?
Minister of State.
Well, once again, he seems to be unnecessarily adding fuel to the speculation, indeed perhaps even scaremongering to his own constituents, which I don't think is particularly valuable. What I will say is that the review will be completed in a timely manner, but it's important to get it right.
Wendy Morton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will my honourable friend commit that in taking decisions about our amphibious capability and other issues, that he will always be guided by military advice as to what capabilities we need?
Well, that's a very fair point. Indeed, at the moment, there has been no advice put on Minister's desk as to where the outcome of this review is going, but it will be based firmly on military advice.
Minister Rachel Maskell and Dr. Julian Lewis.
Given the concern on both sides of the House about the prosecution of Northern Ireland veterans up to 40 years after incidents occurred for which no new evidence is available, what would the Secretary of State's reaction be to an approach from perhaps the main opposition party to see if some form of consensus could be agreed on how to prevent this from happening?
Well, there is broad agreement within Northern Ireland that the current systems and structures for dealing with the legacy of the Troubles are not delivering enough for victims, for survivors and for wider society. We are working with the Northern Ireland office to make sure that investigations are fair and proportionate and focus on terrorists, not the personnel who kept us safe. But of course, we think that there should be further discussions and would welcome such discussions that we can.
Mr. Whitfield. Tom Persglove.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will my right honourable friend join me in commending those members of the armed forces who provided such brilliant support to those who were suffering at the hands of Hurricane Irma, and just set out for the House what difference those efforts have made?
Minister. Well, I'm sure my honourable friend speaks to the whole House. The military response to Hurricane Irma was swift. RFA Mounts Bay was pre-positioned. At its peak, we had nearly 2,000 troops on those islands who were deployed very quickly. They managed to get aid through the use of helicopters and other support to areas that simply would not have received that aid had it not been for the military intervention. And I take this opportunity on behalf of the whole House to thank them for their efforts.
Melanie On.